All right, let's call this meeting of the Anacortes Planning Commission to order. And would you please take roll, Ms. Blackman?
Commissioner Mills.
Present.
Commissioner McCombs.
Present.
Commissioner Ryan.
Present.
Commissioner Martin.
Here.
Commissioner Stoneman.
Here.
Commissioner Jaretsky.
Here.
Commissioner Courier.
Here.
Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Okay, we have before us the minutes of 8/28/24. And are there any changes, corrections? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chairman,
Mr. Mills,
I move to approve the Planning Commission minutes for our August 28th, 2024 meeting as presented in our meeting packet dated November 13th, 2024.
thank you. Is there a second?
A second.
Mr. Stoneman seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Minutes pass. Thank you very much. All right, number 3 is public comment. This is a time for anybody in the audience or online to speak to the Planning Commission about any item not on the agenda tonight. We will give you the opportunity to speak to items on the agenda during the public hearing time. But anybody would like to come up and speak, we would ask that you would state your name, come up to the podium, and tell us what city you're from. Not seeing any here. Are there any people online? No? Okay. Then we're going to move to item number 4, which is public hearings. Public hearing A, SDP 2024-0005, Port of Anacortes T-Dock, Shoreline Substantial Development Permit Application, Open Record Public Hearing, and recommendation to the City Council.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioners, members of the public and the audience. I am Grace Pollard. I'm the senior planner here at the City of Anacortes, and I will be presenting to you a application from the Port of Anacortes regarding the T-Dock. So the T-Dock, for those who may not know, is located on the east end of 13th Street. It does have an address, 1315 Q Avenue. The shoreline designation in that area is urban. The zoning is both commercial on the upland side of the property and commercial marine waterward, and that is similar to the adjacent properties in the vicinity. They all have an urban shoreline designation. The project overview, sorry, I'm a little distracted by all the other things on there, includes the complete removal of T-Dock. That includes 115 creosote timber piles, the full creosote deck planks, approximately 29 pressure-treated fender piles, 55-foot-long concrete apron with a 55-foot-long retaining wall underneath with footings, and a portion of the existing sidewalk. Kind of highlighted these different areas for you. The bluish purple is the existing hard surfaces that are both the approach to the dock as well as the existing pedestrian walkway along the shoreline. Obviously, the yellow is the dock itself with highlighted piles, and then the red piles are the fenders. The new dock, the reconfigured T-dock, will include approximately 35 24-inch steel pipe piles and 5 30-inch new steel pipe piles. There'll be 24 10-inch new steel pipe fender piles. The decking will now be made of concrete panels. And the biggest change, as you can see here, is that they've extended the connection to the shoreline to be the entire width of T-dock. So the width itself is not expanding beyond the original widest area, and is not expanding more waterward than the original T-dock. So it's the space between the existing T-dock and the shoreline that are being filled in with the new pier. The dock will also have upgraded electrical, upgraded stormwater, and lighting. So a shoreline substantial development permit application for projects greater than $1 million is a Type 4 City Council decision with a Planning Commission recommendation. There are mandatory steps in Type 4 review processes that include a pre-application meeting with the city's review team, neighborhood meeting to inform the public and neighbors of the project, as well as then the processing for staff, notice of application, having a 30-day written public comment period, the notice of the hearing itself. So we also have a closed record decision hearing with City Council scheduled for the 25th. So all of the fact-finding information will happen tonight with the public hearing. The Shoreline Master Program, as not everyone may know, is a planning document that outlines the goals and policies for the use, development, protection, and restoration of all the shorelines within city limits. It also includes regulatory requirements for development standards that then implement those goals and policies. Not every goal, policy, and regulation in the SMP is applicable to every single project. So staff reviews every single item and puts in the staff report those that are considered the most poignant to the project. But regardless, anything that applies is required. So if we start with what does the Shoreline Master Program allow in the shoreline environment designations. We have the main proposed use is an industrial and port facility, and this chart indicates through both the lettering and the color coordination that in the urban environment designation as well as the aquatic, it is a permitted use. Also in this proposal are shoreline modifications that include the dock or pier itself, shoreline stabilization, and fill. I added fill here just for reference, as there's not any proposed fill waterward of ordinary high water mark, and so no in-water fill that would have required a shoreline conditional use permit, and so the design managed to stay outside of that area, and thus we just have the substantial development permit to review. Everything looks good there. One of the biggest things about the Shoreline the Shoreline Master Program is ensuring no net loss of shoreline functions and features. And that is demonstrated through a biologist, through what's called mitigation sequencing. That includes these 5 main points: avoiding the impact altogether, minimizing impacts, rectifying impacts, reducing or eliminating impacts, and lastly, compensating. And that order is important. It does go in that order. You must first avoid and lastly compensate. So here are some photographs that the applicant provided in their JARPA application that shows existing conditions and the need for this update. The dock was built in 1977, I believe, and is still functioning, but definitely in need of an upgrade. And with the environmental regulations and knowledge that we now have, we know how important it is to remove creosote from our waters. So part of the mitigation sequencing that was proposed included establishing new habitat or enhancing the shoreline habitat along the northeast side of Cap Sunny Marina. And that's highlighted in this white dashed area and then zoomed in here on the right side. So what the large woody debris does is creates the places for the smaller fish and other marine biology to have a safe place to forage and stay protected from predators that in a perfect natural setting would happen on its own. Trees would eventually die, they'd fall, they'd stay on the shoreline, they'd create this habitat and thus create the kind of idyllic environment. So because there is some minor impacts to the shoreline from the expansion of T-Dock that really can't be avoided for purposes of it being a commercial marine dock, the proposal to mitigate for that, to ensure that overall there's no net loss of shoreline functions and values, the establishment of this large woody debris will be in place on the northeast side of, again, the Cap Sunny Marina. So some of the key points of the application in all is that the project is consistent with the applicable Shoreline Master Program policies and development regulations. That includes for the urban and aquatic shoreline environments, the shoreline use as it's a water-dependent use, the shoreline modifications, no net loss, and ensuring that the shoreline public access is maintained. And I didn't put up a slide for that, but if you have been to the area, you know that you can walk from the Rotary Park on the north side of the marina all the way around the marina itself in front of Anthony's, across this area of Cap Sunny Marina, and then down to Seafarers Park. And that is not going to change. That connection will remain after the reconfiguration of the T-Dock. So the project is anticipated to provide long-term shoreline improvement over existing conditions through the improvement of water quality within Cap Santa Marina, and that's by the removal of all of those existing creosote pilings. An estimated 130 tons of it will be removed for this project, as well as some other miscellaneous submerged debris will be removed. The upgrade to the stormwater system on the deck itself will also aid in improving water quality. And then we have the establishment or enhancement of the shoreline habitat with the installation of that large woody debris. This type of project requires both state and federal permits as well as local permits. The Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife, Department of Ecology, the Army Corps of Engineers, all have requirements and process that the port will have to obtain permits from. So though we are responsible for ensuring that the proposal meets our local Shoreline Master Program requirements, there are many eyes on this project to ensure that it will be in compliant with all local, state, and federal permits. So recommendations. Based on the application materials, the findings of fact and conclusions within the staff report, staff recommends the Planning Commission recommend approval to City Council of this shoreline substantial development permit subject to the proposed conditions listed in the staff report. I've made a copy of those conditions here. There was nothing that staff included that was controversial or surprise to the port. A lot of it is basic, what we might call boilerplate type requirements. So that concludes my presentation. If there are any questions, I know that the applicant is here today and does have a small presentation themselves. And so up to commissioners on which exact order you'd like to proceed in.
Well, let's just ask if any of the commissioners have any questions for Ms. Pollard. That's unusual.
That's good.
Do we have a list of the conditions that you're recommending?
I'm sorry?
Do we have a list of the conditions that you're recommending?
In the staff report,
I actually was looking for them as well.
which was Exhibit A, page 19, and ending on page 20. And I can pull up a
For
copy.
the sake of the audience, we have 395 pages here today.
Plus 48 that came in last night. Madam Chair?
Yes.
The length of this particular proposal was over 300 pages and highly technical and a lot of graphs and whatnot. It was a great opportunity to geek out, so I did. And for some reason, I chose to look at the mitigation planning in some detail and wherever I could pick it up on several reports from environmental engineers as well as the port, as well as the staff report. And I was very impressed with the number of steps that are being taken to not further degrade the marine environment by accident or by part of the construction process or the removal of the old creosote. But at the same time, it was disappointing to learn that all the prior dredging and activity, development, and the past and current use as a busy marina means that there is no biological need to monitor because there's not much biology left to endanger. The flip side, or the better part of that, is that the actions, specifically the one thing that is being monitored is and this is one of my favorite acronyms, the LWDs, have the potential for some reestablishment and improvement over some of the things that, by the nature of its use, have occurred in the past. So I felt the plan to mitigate, given where we're at today, was superb.
So, Mr. Anderson, do you have anything you want to share with us?
Hello, can you hear me? Last time we had some trouble. Hey, Kevin Anderson, Port of Anacortes. I'm here to talk about TDOC and how it can change your life. I'm just kidding. Thank you, Grace. That was a very good overview of the project. I have very few things to add, but I'm just going to run through my presentation since I took the time to retread our neighborhood meeting presentation. So, TDOC, built in 1977, the year before I was built. Creosote treated timber. We know it's bad for the environment, so we're going to replace it. It's nearing the end of its engineered lifespan. It's almost 50 years old. It's sort of at the business end of our marina and definitely gets a lot of business. You've seen some of those photos. If you go to TDOC any time of the year, you see people loading crab pots, slops coming off and on, aero launch, loading freight, taking things out. It's the only drive-down pier, that's the technical term for it. I didn't know that until recently, of its type on Fidalgo Island. It's free for use, so anyone can use it free of charge. We do have a nominal fee for the cranes, but we don't really recoup any costs with that. It's used primarily for fisheries, but also oil spill response and ship chandling. That's where they take supplies out to the ships out in the out in the bay. Oriented ourselves. It's in Cap Sandy Marina, the southwest corner. So we had 4 primary goals: support maritime commerce, restore safety, alleviate a real traffic bottleneck, and build a durable, lasting piece of infrastructure. We want this thing to last 50 years. So just a note on how important this is to our local economy. The average value for TDOC seafood landings is about $10 million, and that's absent tribal fisheries. That was from data from a couple years ago. Inflation's trending upward. I'm not sure what seafood prices are. TDOC itself supports 30 Anacortes-based jobs in the maritime space. 6 Puget Sound tribes use TDOC for loading and unloading their vessels, selling their catch, and it generates approximately $14 million, I think this is 2022, dollars in economic activity here in town. So it's a really important sort of part of our infrastructure portfolio to support. And that picture down there, that's kind of very typical usage. You know, if there's a crab opener and arrows there, it's bedlam. So one of the reasons we want to expand it is so that some of these traffic concerns are allayed. Like I mentioned, TDOC's old and venerable and vulnerable. It's nearly 50 years old, has lots of signs of wear and tear. Its load capacity has been downgraded from 250 PSF to 165, so basically you can drive a full-size truck on it. not to say box trucks. The decking's wearing out. It's got a bunch of patchwork of steel diamond plate to help support those loads, but that's a Band-Aid measure. You can see that forklift cracked through one of the deck boards. That's happened a couple times in the last few years. And finally, it's unable to meet the stresses of climate change. So as we get these king tides, this has happened year over year for the last couple years, the king tides will get all the way up over the piles and onto the pile cap at T-Dock, since it was built in the 70s without an expectation of sea level rise. So we have a 3-step process to getting this built. The first one is obviously mitigation. We're going to do that ahead of time. And I want to emphasize that through our conversations with NIMS, we're on the hook for 18 large woody debris emplacements, not just 10. So it's a fair bit larger than what was presented in our biological evaluation. And we're happy with that. The second step is to demolish the exhaust creosote structure, which Grace kind of outlined the number of things. 140 piles, you wouldn't think it, but there's that many piles in there. 6,000 square feet of creosote decking, 144 tons of creosote treated wood. That's for in the marine environment. There might be a little bit more landward. We're going to construct a new T-Dock at the site. It's going to be on galvanized pipe piles with cathodic protection to make sure that lasts so they don't rust away. We're going to have cast-in-place pile caps. That's basically the beam that sits on top of the piles. They're going to cast that in place with some real interesting formwork to make sure that the concrete doesn't enter the water. And then pre-stressed, pre-cast deck panels will be brought in and grouted into place. I want to talk about the mitigation. And the mitigation sequence is something we think about a lot. To get our projects off the ground, we have to think about mitigation for a lot of these things. So through our conversations with NIMS and WDFW, we landed on a mitigation proposal that meets everyone's requirements. And that's 18 large woody debris structures. Basically, it's a stump 12, 16, 20 feet long with its root wad intact. And those get anchored into place with either a helical anchor or a duckbill anchor and cables. And after a few years, those things become waterlogged. And what happens, as Grace mentioned, it kind of emulates where trees would fall in the water or get washed down a river, and they'd wash up on our shores. And so there's two things that does. First, it has this structural heterogeneity. You have a very complex environment with lots of nooks and crannies for invertebrates and small prey fish to hide. Second is, as the wooden stumps slowly break down, they're releasing an organic material into the environment. They're getting eaten by little invertebrates, and they're forming habitat. And this was a successful approach. We used it at ADOC, where we did, I think, 12 large woody debris emplacements. And the site we chose is really, it's the most intact in the marina. Cap Sandy used to be a portage and a salt marsh 200 years ago. That's not going to happen. We can't expect that for this area that's used by 1,000 boats right now. But the parts of the marina basin that are the best we can enhance, and that's what our proposal is. And we like this proposal because, one, it's on site. Two, we want to do it advanced of the impact. And three, it's a proven strategy. So we're kind of excited about that. Jenkins wanted to come up here. He could talk about this, but I'm going to talk for him. T-Dock is really Jenkins' baby. He has worked so hard to make sure this project gets pushed through. So we're going to talk about demolition of T-Dock. So in the open water work window, we're going to start with pulling off the elements of the dock that can be recycled, reused, or salvaged. So the cranes, which we're going to put back on the dock eventually, lighting, pieces of metal from the bull rail, that sort of stuff. Then we're going to go and peel up each of those deck boards. And while they do this, it's going to be a big mess. Rest assured of that. But we're going to have a silt curtain in place and monitoring to make sure that the pH of the water is good and we don't have impacts on the turbidity. There'll also be some upland, like temporary erosion and sediment controls. And we're going to do the work in as much as possible during low tide and during the in-water work window. They're going to pull the piles, and how that happens is they'll bring in a vibratory hammer mounted on a crane. either land-based or on a barge. Really, means and methods is up to the contractor to figure it out. We have great landward access, so it could be either with this one, and they're gonna grab onto those piles and vibrate them, pull them out of the sediment, and put them on a barge or a truck for disposal. We're gonna demo that 55-foot abutment slab with powered equipment, probably a big jackhammer on an excavator. And all these materials will be hauled for appropriate upland disposal. Creosote logs have to go to a certain type of landfill. Concrete can be used for other things, recycled, ground up, turned into aggregate. And then the exciting part is the construction of the new T-dock, or reconfigured T-dock, which we're trying to be dodgy. Are you building a new dock? No, we're just reconfiguring it. It's a bit of spin, sorry. So first thing's gonna happen is landward of the existing bulkhead, we're gonna drive a sheet pile. That's a big, about inch thick, corrugated piece of piling that link together. And that's gonna prevent seismic outfall, liquefaction in case of a earthquake. On top of that, we're gonna cast the sort of grade beam or abutment for where the dock's gonna land. Gonna drive 40 plumb or bearing piles. They're 20-inch ones with a thick sidewall, 3/4 of an inch, I think. And then 24 fender piles, which are 10-inch piles, much smaller in diameter. And they'll be wrapped in a HDPE sleeve to keep them from wearing out from vessels breasting up against them. All of those pilings are gonna have that cathodic protection so that they last longer. So the zinc prevents them from rusting, but if you run electricity through it, you can, through magic and galvanization, I guess, keep it from rusting. So those are the piles, and on top of them, like I said, we're gonna put those formwork and pour cast-in-place piles, pile caps to support the structure. The deck panels will be imported, probably by truck, and installed. And then on top of that, there's basically a skim coat of like 3 inches of concrete to tie it all together. And then they'll reinstall the utilities, deck gear, and a deck wash bypass, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit here. Yeah, so the new deck is gonna be about 7/10 of a foot taller than the previous T-dock deck. That's about all we could get, because you need to maintain the entrance. So the slope of the entrance is really key. You can't drive a forklift up a real steep incline. So that was one of the big design considerations. Gives us a little wiggle room with sea level rise, but also that taller slab lets us pitch it back towards the parking lot, which will allow us to collect any storm water, especially rinse water when they rinse the deck. And when they're doing the rinsing of the deck, we'll have an automatic bypass system. So water collected then will be bypassed to the sanitary sewer instead of being discharged into the bay, which is a great win for us, we think. It's just a section view. I mean, it's a dock, you guys, but it's a heavily used dock, and it's really important. We're super excited about it. I mean, yeah. So just wanted to share those things. If you have any questions for me, please ask. Jenkins also has a lot of technical knowledge on this, and then we have our engineer and our biologist, I think. No, they're not online. Well, we'll do our best to answer any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Questions? Mr. Courier?
Yeah, I was just curious. Obviously, creosote's bad. Can you just give me a quick little, any detail about that? I
Sure.
had heard that, but I don't know much about it.
Okay, so creosote's bad. It's just basically a heavy end from refining. It's tar, basically. It's got a lot of cresols and other polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons in it. It's been shown for our fish around here especially, it damages their olfaction. So out-migrating salmon, if they have creosote hit them, they're not able to migrate back to their natal streams. Also, it affects juvenile fish, forage fish, eggs, sort of their mortality rate tanks if they're laid on creosote-laden logs. And finally, creosote's nasty. I don't know if you've ever worked with it, but it's also a phototoxin. So you get some on your skin, and you go out in the sun and you get a little sunburn, and it really, it sucks. There's no ands, ifs, or buts about it. So those are the reasons. It's really good at what it did, so that's why it was used for 100+ years. But as we slowly learn, it's kind of nasty. That's why it was phased out for other products.
Mr. Mills?
By any chance, do we have any metrics that measure activity trends in terms of like the last 5 or 10 years, the number of something that are the usage growing, shrinking, staying about the same? Any metrics?
Of TDOC itself?
Yes.
I think that it's been pretty stable. It feels like it's at capacity, but a lot of that's driven by when the fishing openers are, and that's something we haven't any control of. I imagine in bad years where DFW needs to shut down fisheries, Dungeness crab in particular, we might have less usage, but when there's a good year and there's lots of harvest, we'll have more of those openings and more usage.
Do you compile those metrics? Is the data available?
I do not. I'm sorry, fisheries data are not a thing we track. It would be a good rubric. I'm with you, and it would be good. It's a data gap. We don't necessarily understand the entire usage at TDOC, but we're getting there. We're slowly getting there, sorry.
I just had a curiosity question. I was reading about your techniques that you were using to pull up the piles, and you talked about a bubble curtain.
Yeah, so
What's a bubble curtain?
a bubble curtain, it sounds fun, doesn't it? So in some instances, they'll take a ring, it's like a ring of tubing with a bunch of perforations in it, and they'll drop it into the water around a pile, or if it's a small enough and close enough space, they can make a wall, basically, and they'll run a lot of compressed air through it, so it's just bubbles coming up. And what that does is it does a couple things. One is it encourages fish to not go through it, but also by light of all those little bubbles, it acts as a kind of a sonic barrier as well, where it reduces some of the underwater noise impacts. So.
Sounds intriguing. The second question I have, and it's probably somewhere in this report, you talked about the economic importance of TDOC, and so my question is the amount of time that this project will take and what kind of impact that will have economically.
Oh, those are very good questions. I would defer to one of our operations directors who are not here, so I'm going to have to punt. We realize that having this piece of infrastructure offline is really a hit for the community. So what we're going to do is we're going to provide space probably on the west side of Curtis Wharf, where in the interim they can use that space for unloading their crab, unloading their fish, unloading supplies, let's say aero launch services. We haven't really dialed in the details there yet, but it's a temporary situation because pretty much everyone would much rather use the sheltered waters inside the Marina Basin as opposed to the rather sporty waters of Guaymas Channel. And we want to do this work all in one work window. So that's from mid-August to mid-February, and we want to have that wrapped up in that period of time. And obviously there's other impacts besides sort of the impacts to the fisheries and people using the dock. Also, it'll entail a sort of pedestrian detour around the construction site, and we'll have those marked out. We'll have an alternative detour plan put out prior to construction. But all in all, I think it's 9 months. Let me look at Jenkins. There he is. Yeah, Jenkins?
Good afternoon. Excuse me. Good evening, Commissioners. Yes, as Kevin mentioned, the duration of the project is the large wooded debris mitigation that will happen first potentially next fall, but the project is for TDOC to take down everything will happen potentially 2026, 2027, and I'm estimating a 9 months duration when the fish window open in August of that year, and we'll have TDOC construction happen till spring of the following year, so about 9 months duration. So the question you asked was important, the users of TDOC, what we would do to keep those folks operating. We have a Marine Advisory Committee group that meets, and we've been interfaced with that group and looking at potential how to potentially use Curtis Wharf during that time frame to make sure those folks stay in business, they can load and offload, that sort of thing. So, yeah, so we'll go down that path and make sure the user groups, they can stay operate in town here. Yeah.
Okay, so I think the goal is August of 2026 through February of 2027?
So the fish window through our Army Corps permit allows us to do in-water work on August 1st of every year. And so we'll start on August 1st, and we're estimating this will take potentially 9 months, so be done by April, May, about there. So about 9 months duration of construction.
Yeah, that's a big economic hit for sure. And Curtis Dock can handle this?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Actually, at Curtis Wharf, we have way more capacity than T-Dock right now itself. Like Kevin had on the screen over here, just to share with capacity, the low risk criteria is 165 PSF. At Curtis Wharf, we have from 400 up to 1100 PSF at Curtis Wharf. So we have lots of opportunities for folks to continue to operate during a construction span at Curtis Wharf, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Other questions
welcome.
from the commissioners? Thank you for the presentation. And I think since this is I'm going to just open the public hearing, open record public hearing, and ask if anybody would like to speak regarding this replacement of the T-Dock. Not seeing anyone. Is there anyone online?
There aren't any hands raised, no.
Nobody online. So then I will close that public hearing. And it looks like we're asking for a motion. And this will go to the City Council for their decision.
Madam Chairman,
Mr. Mills.
I move that the Planning Commission recommend to City Council that they approve Shoreline Substantial Development Permit SDP-2024-005, subject to the conditions of approval 1 through 11, as were written in the staff report dated November 7, 2024.
Is there a second?
I second that.
So motion by Mr. Mills, seconded by Mr. Ryan to recommend approval to the City Council of the Shoreline Substantial Development Permit SDP 2024-005, subject to the 11 conditions of approval in the staff report dated November 7th. Should we take a roll call vote for this? Yes.
Commissioner Mills,
Yes.
Commissioner McCombs,
Yes.
Commissioner Ryan,
Yes.
Commissioner Martin,
Yes.
Commissioner Stoneman,
Yes.
Commissioner Jaretzky, Commissioner Courier.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you for everybody for all your work on this. And with that, we're going to move to item 4B, 2025 Comprehensive Plan Update. Proposed amendments to the future land use map, urban growth area boundaries, and the goals and policies in the land use, housing, and transportation elements. Nothing too much there.
Good evening, everyone. I'll let folks leave. My name's Libby Grage, and I am the planning manager in the Planning, Community, and Economic Development Department. And I am going to be presenting this item as soon as I can pull up my PowerPoint presentation. So thank you for bearing with me. I still need to share the screen. One day I will have this down. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so again, good evening. First, before we move into the public hearing, I just wanted to give a quick overview of exactly what we're doing here, just for the benefit of people that maybe haven't been involved or don't know the history of what's been going on with the comprehensive plan update. Because I know people are kind of becoming aware of it all the time and haven't necessarily followed everything from the beginning. So I'll try to keep it short. So Anacortes has a comprehensive plan and development regulations which are required under the Growth Management Act. The comprehensive plan is a primary policy document that guides growth and development consistent with the community's vision. And development regulations are laws governing how and where development occurs within the city, and they implement the comprehensive plan goals and policies. The Growth Management Act requires that the city review and update the comprehensive plan and the implementing development regulations on a 10-year cycle. So that is what we are doing right now. We are conducting our periodic review and update of the comprehensive plan. And the Growth Management Act also sets the deadline for completion of this process at December 31st, 2025. So what's being updated with this process? So the comprehensive plan, which includes all of these elements, and then the Anacortes Municipal Code, Title 19, the development regulations and critical area regulations will also be updated as part of this process. Just too much on the screen. So where we've been, the process to update the comprehensive plan began in late 2023. The city hired consultants to assist with the process and also was given grants by the Department of Commerce to help pay for the update. So far there's been data collection analysis, audits of existing documents, goals and policies to see what's changed over the last 10 years since the last periodic update and to identify areas where we need to make updates to the current plan to be compliant with state law. The City Council, Planning Commission reviewed and City Council has adopted a public participation plan. The City Council also adopted or established the 2025 docket of amendments a couple of months ago, of which a few of the items that we'll be talking about in a little bit are included on that docket. There's been ongoing public outreach and communication with the public. The department has a website for the comprehensive plan update where we put out news and draft documents that are available for comment, for review and comment. A climate team has been established to assist with development of the climate element. And draft revisions to goals and policies for the land use, housing, and transportation elements so far have been released for public review and comment. And of course, there's a lot more that's going on, but these are kind of some of the bigger milestones. This is the general project schedule that is in the public participation plan. So we are right here. So we started end of 2023, beginning of 2024. So we're kind of in the middle of the overall update process right now. This is the roadmap to comprehensive plan update success. And so it's just trying to show what our approach is for putting out the draft amendments that we're asking members of the public to review and comment on. And so hopefully this graphic kind of helps with that. So there's a kind of a two-phase approach. The first phase includes the data and analysis and drafting of proposed updates to each of the elements, goals and policies, and for land use, also the future land use map and land use designations. And so that part has been completed at this stage for the land use, housing, and transportation element. So we are right about here in on the road to completing the update process. So we're in a period of public comment. When we come back in 2025, we'll have some additional proposed draft goals and policy updates to some more elements of the comprehensive plan. So probably economic development, utilities, and capital facilities will come as a group, and we will go through those with the Planning Commission, hold a written public comment period, and then a public hearing on those as well. And then likewise for this last group, Parks and Recreation, Environment and Conservation, and Climate. So work is being done on all of these right now. Especially the climate element, so that's kind of the one that's taking the longest because it's an entirely new element. So once we have the draft amendments and they've gone through a public review and comment period, we will take all of that feedback that we've received from the public and create a complete integrated document, draft comprehensive plan, that will include all of the updates to all of the elements, all of the background information, and the climate goals and policies integrated throughout. And then that will be phase 2, where that plan will be available for public review and comment, public hearings, and then finally recommendation by Planning Commission and adoption by City Council. So hopefully that kind of explains what the approach is. I want to make sure that members of the public, know that this is a two-phase process. So we very much appreciate the comments and feedback that you'll provide tonight, and also that we've received in written format, which we've been sending to the Planning Commission as we get them. So the public hearing topics tonight, as are written on the agenda, but are the land use element. We have the future land use map amendment requests, including the urban growth area boundary changes, the land use designation text amendments, and the draft goals and policy updates. And we also have the housing and transportation element goals and policy revisions. The Planning Commission is being requested to, after the public hearing, make a recommendation to the City Council on the urban growth boundary requests. This is just showing, I spelled the name wrong, it's Anacortes. This is showing the portion of the website where we have all of our documents available for public review. So you'll see that we have the different elements going down the left column, and then these documents, including the initial discussion version, and then the Planning Commission's recommended changes to the various goals and policies for each element. Okay, that's the end of my presentation. As far as holding the public hearing, what staff was going to suggest is that we begin with the future land use map amendments, and I could maybe just walk through those quickly. And then we could open the public hearing and see if there's anybody that wants to speak to any of those, if that works for the Planning Commission.
That works great.
Okay. Great. So now I'm going to have to get into another document. I'm just going to open up the document that was in your packets, which is the staff recommendations on the future land use map amendments, because that has all the staff recommendations, and then it also has the maps. So I will just what'd I do? Okay, thank you, John. So as a reminder to everyone, this proposed amendment was something that was suggested by the city's consultant makers and also staff as something to look at potentially in conjunction with the neighborhood commercial overlay in this area. You'll see in the staff recommendation that staff's not recommending continuing on with the idea for the neighborhood commercial overlays at this point. And so this proposal, which was sort of predicated on having that neighborhood commercial concept incorporated into it to provide, more commercial service opportunities for the neighborhood, with additional housing opportunities, it was, felt that could be a good thing to have more services in close proximity to more people, more homes. And so just in summary, on this one, staff is recommending to table this request as well, or not approve this request.
Question about that.
Yeah.
Usually when you table something, you table it to a certain date, or you can table it indefinitely, but which are you recommending?
I might have used the wrong word. Indefinitely would be
Okay.
my, maybe the next comprehensive plan update.
Okay.
Perhaps
Yes.
a process question, if I might. There's 9 docketed items, or 9 that we have in front of us tonight, but we're only being asked to make a recommendation on number 8 and number 9.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. And that's because they have the additional process with the county associated with them. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2, you may recall, is the neighborhood commercial overlay concept. There were 2 options that makers had proposed there. One was the overlay idea, where a new overlay zone would be established and then located in different places within the city. And then the other idea was to change the development regulations in order to allow more neighborhood commercial uses in residential zones. So it would just involve a development regulation amendment and not creating a new overlay zone. And so these maps, this concept, is the overlay concept that I'm going to go through next. So this was one of the areas identified as a possibility, and this is the area, I'm sorry, I don't think I even said where that first area was, south of the commercial and SR20 spur, kind of centered on Commercial Avenue and 38th and Longview. And so the neighborhood commercial overlay is right in that same area, smaller area, but centered on an existing neighborhood store and including some vacant parcels. I'm just going to move through if there aren't any questions on these. The second area that was identified was the 12th Street and centered on 12th Street between G and I. And that also had an existing neighborhood commercial establishment within it. There was another area identified on Oaks Avenue, just east of Anacortes Mine Road, including some vacant properties. And then the last one was a possibility at D Avenue and 29th Street. You'll see in the staff recommendations that staff is recommending tabling or not continuing on with consideration of these ideas. I think that the locations that were selected were maybe not as practical as originally thought, and upon further review, and especially the fact that we haven't had anybody asking for, wanting to build new neighborhood commercial establishments, staff, is just recommending that this is an idea. Maybe that's better for a later date. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next request. Was the Port of Anacortes over at the Anacortes Airport. It was this small piece of parcel P32372 requesting a change from the aeronautical zone to light manufacturing. And you'll see in your packet that staff was recommending approval of this request. The request by Fidalgo Pool Park and Recreation District to change the designation of the area surrounding the pool at the southwest corner of 22nd and J from residential medium density to public zone or public land use designation. And staff's recommendation on that one is to recommend approval of that change. Number 5 was an application or a petition from Tom Skillings to change a portion of property located south of 35th on Fidalgo Bay Road, just east of V Avenue. Change a portion of industrially designated land to residential medium density. Again, staff was recommending approval of that request. Another Port of Anacortes request related to the marine terminal east of N Avenue and north of 3rd Street, requesting a change from the light manufacturing designation to manufacturing and shipping. Staff's recommending approval of that request as well. This is another Port of Anacortes request for the area that we were just talking about, the last project. TDOC is right here. So the request here was to change this area, which is comprised of multiple parcels from commercial to commercial marine. And the area south, well, actually the marine mixed use zone comes a little bit north of Seafarers Way. And then the area to the south of Seafarers Way was requested to be changed from marine mixed use to commercial marine as well. Based on staff's analysis, we are recommending that the northern area that contains Anthony's and the net sheds and T-dock access be redesignated from commercial to commercial marine. We're recommending that the parking lot on the west side of Commercial Avenue retain its commercial designation. Based on our review, it didn't look like redesignating that property would meet the criteria for commercial marine zone. And then similarly, the property that is home to the Marine Technical College and the large gravel multi-purpose parking area, staff is recommending that request to change from marine mixed use to commercial marine be denied as well, and that property retain the existing marine mixed use designation. Yep.
Can you
I'm sorry, I
use
keep,
a different,
yeah, it's not commercial, it's,
Somebody listening might be shocked that they
yeah,
thought we
it's
were
Q
Marine
Avenue.
Commercial on the west side of Commercial Avenue.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No
I
problem.
keep,
It's just a clarification.
yeah, so the west side of Q Avenue is what I meant. Any other questions on that one before I move on? Okay. Okay, so this is the request by the City of Anacortes to add, not quite sure of the number, I think it's 9 parcels, to include them into the urban growth area and eventually annex them to city limits. The majority of these parcels have conservation easements or deed restrictions that require that they continue to be used for recreation purposes and prohibit, new development of any kind on them. And so the city is proposing to request the county approve a expansion of the urban growth area to include those properties so that they can be under the city's permitting authority and other regulatory authority.
before you change that, do you want to talk about the gravel pit?
I think I'll ask, can you say something about the gravel pit? Thank you.
Do you have a specific question?
No.
Oh, well, so the gravel pit wouldn't be ACFL land because it's not quite adjacent to ACFL, and it's a recovering mining operation. So we intend to use it. Right now, the city uses it for storing, like stumps and just materials for parks and operations, and that would be the anticipated continued use. There is no deed restriction as far as what it is, that it doesn't need to be used for parks, but there is a trail through there that obviously the city intends to keep. It's a good connection between Heart Lake and Little Cranberry, that trail. But is that everything?
Yeah, that's good. Just, that particular parcel is different from the other ones.
It is.
In the UGA. Okay.
Right, yeah.
Staff's recommending approval of this request. And then finally, the request from Signal Hill, who originally proposed a much larger area of property be included in the urban growth area. The city council reviewed that request as part of the docketing that happened a few months ago, and determined that they only wanted to have these 3 parcels be considered through the 2025 update process for potential inclusion in the urban growth area. With this, staff is recommending denial of the proposal to include these parcels in the urban growth area. And that's primarily due to the land capacity analysis findings that there is sufficient zone capacity in the existing city limits to accommodate the projected growth through 2045. That's the end of my summary of each of these. If we want to open up the public hearing and hear from the public,
Okay.
I will take a seat.
Okay, so we'll take this in little pieces, I guess. So we'll now open the public hearing for the proposals for the future land use map. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak about any one of these 9 issues? And seeing none, is there anyone online?
There are no hands raised.
Okay. Any comments from commissioners? Then I will close the public hearing for the,
We're just having one public hearing for all of the comp plan land use
Oh.
stuff.
okay. But we're asking for a motion for the 2 proposals for the UGA.
We can wait until all of the public hearing is over. We're just doing it, we're just breaking it up into sections so it's easier for people to understand what is to be commented on. But I
Okay,
think we need to keep the as long as we're doing one public hearing, we need to keep that open and have the
So the
discussion
public-
at the end.
so the public hearing is open still. All right. And we'll come back for a motion, I guess.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry I wasn't more clear about that. So the other items that we have for public comment are the draft revisions to the goals and policies for the housing, land use, and transportation elements. Maybe I could just open up the document for each, and we could see if there's anybody that wants to make comments on any of them.
Okay.
I hadn't planned to go through them unless the commission would like me to do that.
Okay, so is there anybody that would like to speak about the land use policies that are proposed? Seeing none, any hands online?
I'm gonna make sure I'm sharing the right screen. Okay.
Yeah, I don't see any raised
Okay.
hands.
Should we move on to the housing?
We do also in the land use element have the, excuse me, the proposed revisions to the land use designations.
Is there anybody that would like to comment about the proposed changes to the land use designations? Okay, seeing none.
Okay. We'll pull up the housing goals and policies tracker.
We are open for questions or comments about housing. Come on up. If you would just state your name and your city, please.
Shuamu, Anacortes, and I submitted 3 separate documents to City of Anacortes Complan email address as well as the Planning Commission's public email address. And I had the time to comment on the methodology that the city adopted for allocated growth forecast and housing demand forecast by medium income bracket, in addition to housing and the transportation policy tracker table. And I wonder if you have received my written comments. It was sent this morning, late morning.
Yes, the commission received it right before the meeting.
Okay, so probably it doesn't make sense. I repeat everything in my written comments, and I don't have time. With 2 days, can only write so much. I have not had a chance to review the land use documents at all, and I wonder if there's any future opportunity to comment on the land use portion. It's just I don't have enough information to provide any feedback tonight. But as for housing, and the one thing I would like to comment is the new policy emphasize maintain development regulations that permit allowed residential uses by right and avoid conditional uses. This residential uses by right policy contradicts several policies that suggest gradual change, compatibility between existing and new housing, enhance of community sense in the neighborhood, and etc. Conditional use may take longer time to pass. However, it can reduce and eliminate potential conflicts and issues down the road, and it does not contradict any other policies in this document. And additionally, as for integrating manufactured housing in all residential zones, I have written this morning an extensive paragraph on that particular segment. And I have been in the housing industry for 25 years, and my first job was manufactured housing in the United States for Weyerhaeuser Company. And distinctively, 3 different segments. And distinctively, the mobile home, I guess, is what's in this policy. It is built to the HUD code, not the residential site-built codes. And the interior walls does not provide any load bearing. And the lateral load capacity for residential homes, lateral load, I mean wind load or earthquake, they're different to your site-built homes. And it is important the site has to be suitable and the environment has to be suitable for mobile home, and it has to be economical. And back in October, and I looked into the Attorney General's office complaints in Washington State. #1 complaint is the rent hike for the mobile home lot rental fees. And mobile homes in mobile home park is the most cost-effective and economical solution. So I would really suggest the city consider what's truly the economic solution for affordable housing, not just trying to say, okay, let's put this piece of product on a residential lot. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak about housing? Not hearing any.
Okay. Excuse me. Okay, so the last one is, there it is, transportation.
Yes, you can speak again. 3 minutes.
Xiuanmu, Anacortes. And as for the transportation documents, and I actually like quite a few policies in the document. And one thing I do want to point out, I probably also commented in the columns in the policy table, tracker table, is policy T-3.17. The policy states supporting a plan written in 1994 and a plan written in some date in 2012, as well as all future development must be in accordance with the 2005 plan. And let's think about it. 1994 is exactly 30 years ago. What's the population? Do you use fax machine or you use a calculator, ruler? So it's totally different. This is completely out of date. We need current guidelines and objectives. So let's really update this document that make it relevant. It's going back 30 years ago. 2005 would be 17 years ago, 17, 18 years ago, and 2012, most recent is a dozen years ago. So that's too old. And secondly, there are lots of efforts in promoting pedestrian, bicycle, non-driving methods for using the transportation infrastructure. But let's remember, today, bicycle and the pedestrians, they are extremely low and minor using our transportation grid. So volume by groups, pedestrian, bike, motorcycle, freighters, and high occupancy vehicles, as well as single occupancy vehicles, the volumes are significantly different. The highest volume is single occupancy vehicle. So whatever efforts we put in, and versus whatever down the road, 50 years from now, let's make sure it addresses the current needs first. That's most important. And also, the city would like to have a monitoring system. Let's see, how is a monitoring for data collection? I remember it was regularly collect and monitor data. A sound transportation system actually had been in existence in the world before we even had computers. So design a transportation system for the needs of its users is more important than technology. And technology will not resolve poor design. So I oppose the spending money on tracking and monitoring system, and also hiring a team to monitor the data, maintain the computer system, and update it periodically. And the most important thing is, what are you going to do with the data when there's an issue? And before we had computer, we have roads work, and we have the system work. And a design problem will never be resolved by technology. Just like when we have a governance problem, it will never be resolved by technology. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak about the transportation policies? You please just state your name and your city, please.
That's so new. I don't know. Andrea Dahl, Anacortes. Actually, this is more of a question, and you did say you were inviting questions. Mm-hmm. Ever since I have moved here, I have been very concerned about access into Anacortes and out of Anacortes during emergencies, and the use of our Highway 20, even though it is a side, going down to the ferry system. I have waited, when ferries outload, I have waited 15 minutes at least to get onto Highway 12 there, or what we call 12 Avenue. What if there is an urgency? Isn't there some kind of a federal rule that says that if in a crisis you must be able to exit an area within a certain period of time. And I'm very concerned that we have a little two-lane road, sometimes it becomes three, that goes down into the ferry system and into a very highly populated area. So I just have a question and wonder if anyone can answer that, or maybe Libby can answer that, but I'm open to that.
I don't think I have an answer to that question right now, but I'm happy to follow up with you, Ms. Dahl. Correct, but I would like to look into it, and I will also follow up with the public and the commission, but also with Ms. Dahl. I know that as part of our climate element, we are looking very closely at certain not weaknesses, what's the word I'm looking for, but we're looking to make sure that the city is prepared to deal with climate change at least, but also be resilient to the impacts of climate change. And that doesn't necessarily address your specific concern, but I know that as part of the climate element, there are discussions that are happening around areas where there are concerns about issues happening in case of floods or tsunamis or things like that.
And those vulnerabilities are certainly part of emergency medical services and all of the EMS kind of planning.
Yep, thank you.
Yes.
Erica Pickett, Anacortes. And I'd just like to make a comment. I'm actually very much in favor of the planning for bicycles and pedestrians. And I'd like to point out to those who drive cars, please, every time you see somebody walking or riding a bike, realize that they've just made a space for you on the road. They're not in a car. So there is some overlap there. To the extent that we can make things safer and easier for those on foot and on bicycles, we'll have more space on the road. And if we were to get really ambitious and make the shoulders wider along 12th Street, we might also go a ways towards helping with emergency access. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? We do appreciate your comments, both in person here and the written comments. We have quite a few here to look through, and we do appreciate them.
So if the commission would like, I could bring up the agenda bill that had the suggested motion, if that would be helpful regarding the urban growth area requests.
I think it would be helpful.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Mills.
would it be possible to bring up the slide that shows the argument supporting the recommendations? Number 8 would be on page 334 of 395. And number 9 would be on page 336, I think it is. That helps.
I'm sorry, did you say, is this what you were looking for?
Number 8 and number 9, yeah, I saw them flash by there a second ago.
Okay, I'll go to number 8 first. Did you want to see the staff recommendation, or?
No, the support, maybe the next page has a little bit, yeah, it overlaps.
It's the agenda bill that has the recommended motion.
Right.
What are you looking for, Mr. Mills?
Well, I find, just wanted to read it again with a fresher mind. I found earlier today in reading these that number 8 was quite compelling. Number 9 I found less compelling. I understand the argument that on paper we don't need to expand the urban growth area, but what we do on paper doesn't drive what will happen in the marketplace. The market will drive what actually gets built. So that alone doesn't compel me to want to disallow that expansion that was proposed in number 9. But I could listen to more, I could be convinced.
Well, I can tell you by law, we need to demonstrate a need to expand our urban growth area. If we can't demonstrate an actual need to do so, the county's not going to do it. So without, pretty compelling need to expand our urban growth area, it's going to be very challenging for us to try to request that the county expand the urban growth area. So that's why we have recommended to not include this area in an urban growth area expansion, because we're not showing a need for additional housing to accommodate future population growth.
That raises the question of why this was docketed, because we had that answer way back early this year.
Well, we didn't have it answered at the time that they applied for this and docketed it. We were still studying it, and at the time we really wanted to look at whether or not we were going to need more zoned capacity for 0 to 50 AMI housing, area median income housing, because we hadn't done the full analysis of our zoning yet. We knew what we knew that at that time that we had enough area to accommodate our population, but we didn't know if our zoning was correct to accommodate all the types of housing that we need to accommodate. So that's why we left it on there. That's why council decided to leave it on there.
Okay.
Or to docket it, I should say.
Yeah.
I think it's wise to deny this one because we don't have that need. So even if we did vote to approve it, then it would go to the county, and we would still have to justify to the county, and would not be able to justify based on the land capacity analysis that we already have. So it makes sense to me to deny it. Other comments? The motion, the suggested motion is on page 311 of 395. Mr. Stoneman.
I would like to move that we recommend that the City Council pass a resolution to support the city's application to add the city-owned parcels to the urban growth area and direct staff to remove the properties owned by Signal Hill LLC from the urban growth area expansion application.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Motion by Mr. Stoneman, seconded by Mr. Dretsky, to recommend to the City Council that they pass a resolution to support the city's application to add the city-owned parcels to the urban growth area and to direct the staff to remove the properties owned by Signal Hill LLC from the urban growth area expansion application. Any further discussion? If not, we will take a roll call vote.
Commissioner Mills?
No.
Commissioner McCombs?
Yes.
Commissioner Ryan?
No.
Commissioner Martin?
Yes.
Commissioner Stoneman?
Yes.
Commissioner Dretsky?
Yes.
Commissioner Courier?
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Thank you very much. All right.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
did we officially close the public hearing?
No, that's what I was about to do.
Okay.
That okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm officially closing the public hearing. Thanks for keeping me on track. Now we're going to move on to item 5, other business, and I see nothing listed here. And number 6 would be Planning Department update.
Evening. I didn't know, you moved on quickly. I didn't know if the Planning Commission wanted to discuss any of the other topics, but you're welcome to, but I see not. I was the other land use, I know you're not making a recommendation on anything, but I didn't know if there was any further discussion. Feel free to have further discussion if you want. Otherwise, I'm happy to move on to the Planning Department update. All right.
Yep.
So last night staff brought the Planning Commission's recommended county planning policies and amendments to the council. And the council reviewed the Planning Commission's recommendations as well as the countywide planning policies as amended and recommended by the Skagit Council of Governments GMA Steering Committee. They had a vigorous conversation about the topic. It went on for about a half an hour, and they had some questions about the Planning Commission's recommendations, and what they ultimately chose is to go with they did select 2 of the Planning Commission's recommendations. One of them was an edit to where a comma was that I think Commissioner Mills pointed out, and the other was to change all of the instances of planners group or planners committee, I forget what the term was in there, to GMA Technical Advisory Committee. So those are the what the City Council chose to select from the Planning Commission's recommendations, and they did make a recommendation to support the CPPs as written with those 2 Planning Commission recommendations. So we'll get that resolution tidied up here in the next couple of days and passed back over to the Skagit Council of Governments so that they can continue their process at the county level. We had tentatively put on the Planning Commission's agenda for, we gave you that tentative agenda for this fall leading up to Thanksgiving. And we had tentatively put on there a meeting for December 20th. The Planning Commission has got all of its work done that we were hoping to achieve before Thanksgiving, so we're not going to have that special meeting on the 20th. I hope that's okay with the Planning Commission, that you don't have to come back for a 7th week in a row. We're really appreciative of you I forget, we've lost track of how many weeks in a row we've done this, and we know it's been a lot, and we really appreciate all of the hard work. And now we've gotten to a point where we can take our foot off the comp plan gas pedal for a little while. We are going to have a meeting on December 11th, and at that time we're going to be looking at a proposed ordinance that will help the city comply with House Bill 5290, which is due at the end of the year. That's why we're pressing it in right now. And then since we'll be having that meeting, unless a shoreline permit or something comes up between now and then, which we're not really anticipating, well, we have you here for that meeting. Leave it up to you if you'd want to chip away at some of the housing action plan items some more, work on that a little bit. Take that in small bite-sized chunks. We've got many months to get that done, but knock it off what we can. It's a good opportunity since we've got a light agenda on the 11th. So that's what we're hoping to do, and that's our planning commission or planning department update.
Would you mind letting us know what is HB 5290?
It has to do with permit process timelines.
Oh.
Official title is Second Substitute House Bill 5290, Project Permits, Local Project Review, Various Provisions. That's the official legislative title. So. Yeah, it was passed in 2023 to try to speed up the development review process, yes.
Okay. So no meeting next week. We'll miss you all very much. Oh, and no, next meeting is December 11th.
And that'll be the only meeting in December because your next scheduled meeting is on Christmas Day, so we're not, obviously that's not going to happen. And we're just going to cancel that one.
Okay. Do you have something you want to say,
Madam
Mr.
Chairman, yes.
Yes.
Wanted to comment on the last agenda item at City Council last night. I did watch the video of the discussion. There was a lot of confusion, and I felt like it was never really resolved. There was a perception that the language proposals that we had approved unanimously had to do with the process for the current plan, when in fact the current plan in terms of the data allocations and approvals are done. The wording changes were for prospective activity, and I don't think there was confusion, I think partially because in the same item was the data from this plan, whereas the policy and procedure document has to do with how you proceed in the future. So that was my observation of what took place.
All right. Hearing nothing else, let's see. Wow. It's 7:44 and we are dismissed.